All these events began a long, long time ago. On the cliff, which was always sanctified by the sun's rays, was located the fabulously beautiful kingdom of Niande. The people of this kingdom worshipped the goddess of mercy, Verdelia, and lived every day in prosperity. But one day, 100 years ago, the kingdom was engulfed in a terrible war. Evil demons appeared from somewhere and really wanted to seize his territory. Gradually, being hostage to the war, the kingdom of Niande turned into a real ruin. Death and destruction reigned everywhere. Only after a very long time was the Great War able to end in victory. With peace restored, the kingdom was once again at the height of its history. At this time, a trader at the fair met a familiar face. He was very glad to see his friend. But suddenly he noticed that she was not in the mood at all, and she looked very depressed. Is it really the princess again? The merchant immediately guessed the reason for her anxiety. The woman who worked as a maid in the royal palace didn't even know where to start. Everyone in the kingdom knew that there had been a lot of strange rumors about the princess for a long time. Some even said that she was happy to use people as footrests, and her holy sword had been bleeding for a long time. But in fact, the woman admitted that the princess is much worse than rumors circulate about her. Vandalism was commonplace for the princess. The maid said that a couple of months ago she developed a weapon with which she destroyed almost the entire castle when she carried out experiments. And the other day the princess told her unfortunate father the king that she was not going to get married, even though it had already been finally decided. Her fiancé was shocked. He also thought that this was already a closed question. The guy didn't understand why she changed her mind so abruptly. He tried in every possible way to convince her and asked for forgiveness if he allowed himself to do something disrespectful towards her. Please just tell me. It pains me unbearably to think that you are shedding tears behind this armor. The guy gently took her hand, hoping for her prudence. But the next moment, he didn't even have time to come to his senses when she grabbed him and threw him over herself, using a painful hold. Her father, the king, was in a panic. With her behavior, she almost led to a war with a neighboring country. The king crawled on his knees at their feet, begging for forgiveness. Then the maid admitted that in fact, because of the princess in the royal castle, every day there is a new problem. Oh, well, nothing can be done. The merchant died. He, like everyone else, understood perfectly well that the princess simply could not be stopped. One way or another, the princess was the descendants of the same great knight Arthur, who saved the kingdom from destruction 100 years ago. Although no one saw any benefit from the princess and believed that she was very vicious, but her ancestors took upon themselves the responsibility of conquering the demons and protecting the kingdom. Thanks to them, now not a single demon or monster approached the borders, and now all the residents could sleep peacefully. In addition, stories about the adventures of the princess were very popular among children, and they liked them very much. All the little girls in the kingdom always really wanted to be like the princess. Despite her, we should be grateful to the princess for the advent of a peaceful era. The people who were talking were those who had gathered at the merchant's counter and were listening to the entire conversation. The maid became even more upset. She did not share the delight of these people. What do they even carry? In fact, the fear and envy of the people towards the princess was incredibly enormous. According to the stories, she considered herself the center of the universe and always wondered what she wanted. If you think about it carefully, she looked more like a tyrant. Her poor old father always had to settle all the incidents that were her fault. Employees constantly came to him and complained about the enormous damage that the princess had caused. The numbers were staggering. In addition, even neighboring countries complained about it. Day by day, the damage only increased. But one fine day, everything changed dramatically. "Your Majesty!" the servant shouted, running to the king, who was in a great mood and calmly enjoying hot tea. The guy said it was very urgent, and then he added that his daughter, the princess, was now heading straight to him. The king reacted calmly to this, although he was a little surprised. He knew that she had gone on vacation to the first-level monster zone. The next moment, the door opened and she entered. "Daddy, I'm back!" The girl screamed from the doorway with a smile on her face. The king was shocked, as was everyone around him. He couldn't even remember the last time he saw her in a dress. The old man sat on the throne with an uncomprehending look, staring at his daughter. The princess became very worried when she saw his expression. She even began to worry that he was having an attack. "No, princess. You just appeared before me in such an unusual outfit." The king answered his daughter, although he felt that at the sight of her he almost had a heart attack. He then told his daughter that she looked great, and that outfit suited her very well. He was still very worried about the question of why she decided to wear a dress today, because she always wore armor only. The daughter was a little embarrassed and answered, giggling, that she was a lady after all. Besides, sometimes she just wanted to flutter like a spring breeze. Everyone was very surprised by this answer. The answer was not at all like the princess they knew. Moreover, they perfectly remembered the everyday image of this spring breeze. Then the princess, a little embarrassed, admitted that she hurried to the castle because she urgently needed to tell her something. Despite her sweet appearance, the king immediately became scared at that moment. "I'm going to get married," suddenly she said to her father in a solemn voice. The king could not believe his ears. He froze in place for a while, his mouth open in surprise. For 22 whole years she was indifferent to all living beings, not to mention men. And even the prince who was engaged to her was rejected by her. And now she started talking about marriage. Finally, this amazing event happened. His Majesty the King was incredibly shocked. Only the king's servant had a different opinion. He knew very well that anything could be expected from the princess. The guy was sure that very soon he would have to console the king. But the old king at that moment was in seventh heaven. It was as if a stone had been lifted from his soul. He never expected to hear the word marriage from his daughter. And when did you manage to become such an adult? As a father, he sincerely respected the decision of his beloved daughter. "Oh, father, I always ruin everything. I thought you would be against it." The girl answered with feigned naivety. The king tearfully admitted that sometimes she makes him nervous. "But how can I be against your will?" At that moment only one thought could not leave the old king's head. "Finally, I will be free." For 22 years he took care of the princess. He remembered her childhood very well, how she destroyed all her toys and promised to do the same to him if he didn't play with her. These were very long and difficult years for him. Thank you, Goddess of Mercy, Verdelia. He was incredibly happy that his daughter was getting married. Of course, he didn't know who was so unlucky to have a tyrant like her, but he was still glad that now she was his headache. He was already mentally imagining how he would see his beloved daughter off from his castle. Somewhere deep down, the king was sure that her character should change after marriage. But for now, he could only wish patience for his future son-in-law. The king hoped that this poor guy could live in peace. Then the king asked his daughter to quickly tell him who she wanted to marry. Prince of a nearby kingdom? Noble heir? Farmer? Soldier? The king noticed his daughter's embarrassment after his question, and said that she should not be embarrassed at all. He promised to accept any young man she chose. "This is the Demon King. I want to marry the Demon King," the girl answered with delight after a short pause. The announcement of the princess's marriage quickly spread throughout the kingdom. Many people were happy to hear that the princess was finally getting married, and they blessed her without knowing the details. There were indifferent people. There were also those who did not believe in it. But mostly, everyone was interested in how events would unfold. "Marriage with the devil is absurd. Our kingdom has never been a supporter of these monsters and devils," he shouted, expressing his displeasure in front of King Nektu. The old man listened to him silently and did not answer. He felt that he was about to go crazy from all these events. The count continued to be indignant. He once again reminded the king that their kingdom had existed for centuries in fear of demons. 100 years ago, there was a war that claimed the lives of many people. Fortunately, thanks to the Knight Arthur, they were able to restore peace. But still, countless people were killed by demons. And how, after all this, can a descendant of the Knight Arthur tie the knot with a demon? Marriage with a demon? Yes, Arthur would turn over in his grave from what he heard. The king listened to the count and understood that of course he was right. He also understood that now he would also have to beg for forgiveness from his ancestors. The count advised the king that now is the time to show his strong character and influence the princess. The king accepted this advice without enthusiasm. He, like no one else, knew how stubborn the princess was. "I have a different opinion on this matter," said the guy who suddenly entered the king. The king was very happy to see this young man. He believed that this was the only one who could pacify his princess. "You are so brilliant that you were able to cope with the princess from a young age." The king admired the guy. The guy, of course, had a completely different feeling since childhood, but now there was no time for that. The king began to beg the princess's friend named Shane to try to reason with her. But the guy replied that although he also did not support her decision to marry a demon, but he believes that they should all trust the princess more. What is this idiot talking about? The enraged count intervened in the conversation. He began to explain to the guy that this marriage should absolutely not be allowed. This will disgrace the honor of Knight Arthur. Sir Nectu, aren't you too stubborn for a civil servant? The guy answered. He tried to explain that the princess was still young, and the fact that she is a descendant of the Knight Arthur should not burden her. So word for word a fight began between them. It was enough for the king that the princess was constantly destroying the castle, and these two also decided to create a mess. Stop the fight! But they did not pay any attention to the king. Shane tried to explain to the stubborn count that the princess always served for the people and did more for them than anyone else. Therefore, like no one else, she also had the right to personal happiness. Moreover, he suggested that this be viewed as a great opportunity and chance to establish friendly ties with the Demon King. Counselor Shane, what nonsense are you talking about? Although the fight had already stopped, the count was lying on the floor and refused to get up. He threw a tantrum like a little child. Friendly relations with vile demons? I will never agree to this. After some time, they still managed to calm the count down a little. Besides, this was not the time to act like this when the dignity of the entire kingdom was at stake. He even suggested that the Demon King somehow managed to take over the princess's mind, which is why she does such terrible things. I completely agree with you. Neither of you are interested in this engagement. Suddenly they heard the voice of the princess, who quietly entered the room. The count and Shane opened their mouths in surprise. The princess appeared before them in an image that they had never even seen. Princess, what brought you here? Asked the old king. The girl replied that she was just walking nearby and decided to pop in to find out how preparations for the wedding were going. And then, turning to the count, she added that she stood under the door and heard their entire conversation. I was just curious, so then maybe continue your conversation. Then she approached the count, who had fallen on his ass with sparkling, furious eyes, and invited him to tell her a little more about her ancestors. She then took out her sword and held it to his throat. Shane immediately rushed to explain that the count was not talking at all seriously. They're just really interested in why she made that decision. So are you interested in my love story? Suddenly, the girl began to smile and became a nice girl again. Smiling, she promised that she would tell them everything now, since they wanted to know it so much. The girl said that this happened not so long ago, on the day when she completed conquering the monsters. The northwest border area was occupied by demons during her winter vacation. Then she had to urgently set off to conquer. The demons were amazed that people dared to invade their territories. But then they saw that this was the princess who caught the demons of children and could kill a dragon with one hand. The girl gave them 5 seconds. If you disappear out of sight during this time, I will spare your life, she promised. It took the demons 3 seconds to quickly get away from there. The princess's knights said among themselves that sometimes she looked more like demons than the demons themselves. Then suddenly a strange wind blew in and began to swirl the blizzard around her, lifting snow into the air. And that's when she met him. A moment later, after she saw him, a battle began between them. The princess immediately realized that she had a rather strong enemy, who was unlikely to be stopped only with the help of her sword. Besides, she didn't even know who he was. And before engaging in battle with him, it was necessary to find out this. The girl rushed forward and delivered an attacking blow, but he easily defended himself from it with his magical cloak. The only thing she noticed was that she managed to cut off his horn. At that moment, he appeared before her without hiding or hiding. Now she was absolutely sure that in front of her was none other than the Demon King. He looked intently into the princess's eyes and turned sharply to his demons. There is no need to shed blood in vain. We're coming back. And a moment later, he disappeared along with his demons. He left the princess alone on the battlefield among the corpses of her knights. Since that day, I cannot forget him, the princess confessed. This was the first time she had felt something like this. Demon King charismatic, majestic, with a strong character. Everyone thought that it was these qualities that made the princess fall in love with him. But in fact, she admitted that she was captivated by his handsome face. And when she remembered this, she lost control. Everything around her turned into chaos. The friend couldn't believe that her good looks alone were the reason she decided to marry him. But the girl answered irritably that besides his handsome face, tall height, and good physique, there was something else. More precisely, this was the most important thing. I have never met anyone as strong as anyone to fight with me on an equal footing. The princess explained that the Demon King is the first whose strength is almost equal to her strong ones. the only one she fell in love with at first sight. Isn't this fate? The princess was delighted with her choice and could not wait a second longer. Therefore, I decided to ask the Demon King to marry her right now. I don't want, the Demon King replied in a confident tone when he heard the marriage proposal. He didn't care what excuse he used to refuse, but he wasn't going to satisfy people's needs. He understood even less why he should marry this princess. So he decided to immediately send a response, which would be something smart or something like that. Princess, stop this nonsense, the Demon King said irritably in his video message. The father immediately tried to calm his daughter, who was very upset that she was rejected. He tried to explain that there are still a lot of men in the world, and a man who did not recognize the charm of his daughter is, from his point of view, a useless idiot. But to his surprise, the princess reacted very calmly. She replied that everything was fine and thanked him for his support. If I wish too much, I guess I'll go back to my chambers. She answered her father in a calm voice and bowed. The father was amazed. That was incredible. He already thought that she would immediately throw a tantrum, but she patiently accepted the answer. It was as if it was not his daughter, and he now began to worry very much about her. Shane watched the princess leave, and at that moment he understood everything. It was incredible. But she really fell in love for the first time in her life. Already late at night, the princess sat on the balcony and looked into the starry sky. Suddenly there was a knock on the door and a voice asked permission to enter. It was her childhood friend Shane. The princess asked what brought him to such a late hour. The guy, looking guilty, asked for forgiveness and explained that he had just come to check if everything was okay with her. What? You thought I would shed tears because of this? She answered the young man with a smile. She then reminded that she could make many men cry because of her. But the guy already knew this very well. I worry about you. You have always been indifferent to everyone. The princess replied that he should not worry. Besides, she herself now understood that she could not get everything she wanted. What a pity that my first love ended so quickly. Now I have to finish my studies, she said to the young man in a melancholic voice. He was amazed by her words and promised that he was ready to always support her if she reasoned so sensibly. After some time, a line of carts left the castle. The guard was surprised when he learned that the carriage was going to the Demon Kingdom as a tribute. Despite the fact that the princess was rejected, she declared her intention to stop the senseless war with the Kingdom of Demons and make peace. At this time, the king was communicating with his daughter's friend. The old man really hoped that the princess would still be able to make peace with the Kingdom of Demons, and that peace and quiet would finally come. But suddenly a servant ran in and screamed, "Your Majesty, we're in trouble!" He explained that Princess Mystery traveled with the carriage to the Demon Kingdom. The princess was riding in a carriage and thinking. She couldn't believe that she had managed to fool everyone so easily. After all, they still knew her very poorly. Demon King, how dare he reject me? The girl spoke to herself, tightly clutching her sword. I will do such things to you that you will not be able to live without me. Sometime later, late at night, the Demon King stood on the balcony and peered into the distance. At that moment, a servant came and said that a carriage sent from the kingdom of Niande would soon arrive. The king dismissed the servant, and he himself began to think. In fact, because of these people, he already had a headache. Suddenly, a voice behind him attracted his attention. He said that until yesterday, people sent troops to conquer, but after being refused a wedding, they suddenly send yes disrespect. What is going on in this kingdom? The king answered irritably, so that he would not talk nonsense. Then he said that he was tired and asked not to disturb him. The demon named Daigle bowed to the king and said to himself with a mysterious look as the king left, I have something suitable to relieve your fatigue, and I will send you excellent medicine. At this time, the carts were already approaching the castle. The Demon King's castle was directly ahead. Suddenly, the soldiers who were guarding the carts noticed a huge sand cloud behind them. Nobody understood what it could be. But everything turned out to be much simpler than it seemed. It was a friend of the princess's, who was chasing the carts at full gallop and was very afraid of being late. Why the hell did you do that? He asked the princess in her carriage. He was outraged that she deceived everyone and without telling me a word slipped away. And what kind of clothes are you wearing? The princess's ears were blocked from this scream. She had even forgotten how noisy he could be. Don't worry, I have a plan, the girl answered self-confidently. But the young man was not at all satisfied with this answer. He grabbed the princess and continued to scream hysterically. He explained to the princess that if she was caught, the kingdom would be over. "Why can't you live in peace?" The princess realized that it was better not to joke with him now, and decided to let him in on her plan. "Listen carefully. I'll tell you my brilliant plan only once." The girl explained that when they arrived at the castle, they would tell the king that they had brought an offering. That's when she will say that she is a maid. That's why she's in this shape. She then added that when the servants who were sent as offerings appear before the king, everything will begin. When the king passes by her, she will raise her head and look straight into his eyes. The girl was sure that the king would not be able to resist such a beauty. The king will immediately take her hand and propose to her. She will of course pretend that she is not sure and does not even know what to do. That's what I'll tell him, and that's how I get him. The princess was delighted with her brilliant plan. The guy was shocked. He didn't even know what to answer her. It was a disaster. And at that moment the cart stopped and they were told that they had arrived at the place. Shane needed to leave immediately. He was supposed to be with the delegation. If he wasn't there, they would think it was strange. "Princess, I beg you, just don't bring everything to a disaster." He spoke to the princess as he left. The Niande Kingdom delegation lined up at the entrance. Everyone was waiting for the king to appear. The princess quickly jumped out of the carriage to stand with the maids. She didn't like her friend's last words. He talked about her like she was a problem. After some time, the castle door opened and he appeared. The princess glanced at the king out of the corner of her eye. She was thrilled that demons could look so cool. The king was asked to look at the offerings that were brought to him, and he immediately did so. The princess saw that he was walking straight towards her. Everything went strictly according to her plan. A little more and the time for the main part of the plan will come. Right now! The girl thought and looked up at the king at the moment when he was right in front of her. The girl looked at him with the most naive eyes and a sweet smile. Most importantly, she noticed that he paid attention to her and also looked at her intently. Then the Demon King moved on, but it didn't matter anymore. The princess was absolutely sure that her mission had been successfully completed. Our gotcha king, that facial expression. He must have fallen in love with me immediately, she thought at that moment. The Demon King inspected all the offerings and ordered everything to be placed in a warehouse. Then he ordered to transfer all the maids under the control of the main Morok. And further, that maid! The king suddenly said and pointed to the princess, who was already preparing to receive the main prize for her wonderful plan. Arrest her right now. Perhaps she is the killer lurking among the offerings, the king said to his soldiers completely seriously. He explained that when he passed by her, she looked at him with a look that was full of cruelty and horror. He then again ordered her to be arrested and searched. The Wars immediately grabbed this strange lady, who began to behave very aggressively. It looked very much like the king was right. The princess's friend immediately turned to the king, explaining that this was some kind of mistake. The guy explained that this maid was not at all suspicious. On the contrary, she is one of the most elite maids in our kingdom. Of course she looks a little scary. Yes, and her character is rude, but she is an excellent specialist, Shane convinced the king. The guy guaranteed on his behalf and the entire delegation that she was not a murderer. They would never act so vilely in their life. The young man's words convinced the Demon King, and he ordered the girl to be released. After this, the king quickly returned to his castle, and the main Morok lined up the maids in front of her and began to give instructions. From now on, this castle will be your workplace. The princess stood in the crowd of maids and thought. It was stupid not to admit that her plan did not work quite as she expected. But fortunately, she still had a plan B. However, for this she would have to take time and work as a maid. But the girl was still absolutely sure that when she got the chance, she would definitely make the Demon King hers. A couple of weeks later, the princess lay in her small servant's room and thought. She came here for the sake of the king, but now she did not understand what she was doing here. Tina! The main Morok suddenly entered the room. She told the girl that there would soon be a party at the castle, and she, as one of the best, will have to serve the guests. The princess couldn't believe her ears. This would be a great opportunity to move on to the next stage of her plan B. With cries of joy, she threw her arms and arms at the main Morok, who did not hide the fact that it was very difficult for her to imagine human participation in such an event. At this time, a stranger stood under the door of the princess's room and listened to everything. Rejoices, not even knowing what will happen there. Human. What an absurdity. So the day has come for the long-awaited dinner party. All the guests sat at a long table, at the head of which sat the Demon King. As planned, the unfortunate Princess Atina was sent away as a maid to dinner. She was delivering bowls of soup. The girl stopped near the king to place soup in front of him. Suddenly, something went wrong and the plate slipped out of her hands. "I'm sorry, I'll clean it up now." The girl justified herself in a confused voice, wiping the table right in front of the emperor. And at that moment, the emperor looked up at her and their gazes met. "Excuse me, I'm so sorry." The girl spoke with tears in her eyes. And of course, everything happened exactly as she planned. The king took her hand and pressed her to him. "Don't bother yourself. And by the way, are you free tonight? It was the perfect plan. And everything should have happened exactly like this." But he was too far from her. The princess was placed at the very end of the long table, and she had no chance to get closer to the king. After some time, the head Morak gathered all the maids who were serving the banquet. She explained that each maid would be introduced to the nobles, and she would personally serve the king. "What about me?" the princess asked. But in response to her question, she was simply pointed to the fat nobleman whom she would have to serve. The princess was disappointed. She thought it was a great opportunity to get closer to the king. But in the end, everything doesn't go according to her plan again. And now she didn't have a chance. They began serving soup made from ogre's eyes. And the princess could only be content with the fact that she could at least see his beautiful face from a distance. Suddenly, the girl smelled a strange smell. The most interesting thing is that this smell was definitely already familiar to her. The princess couldn't remember, but there was something bad about that smell. And suddenly she remembered. The next moment she saw that the king was ready to try his soup. Without thinking for a second, she quickly jumped and knocked the plate out of his hands. There was a commotion. The soldiers were immediately ordered to catch this girl who was attempting to kill the king. "What you need to focus on now is not me," the princess said, pointing at the broken plate of stew. She then explained that it was a terrible poison that instantly spread throughout the body as soon as it touched the tip of the tongue. "You demons don't smell at all, or what?" Whispers began around. Demons didn't trust people, but it was very unlikely that this girl was lying, and this meant that there was a murderer somewhere in the castle. "About this poison, I also know something, our king." Suddenly, a one-eyed demon turned to the king. Then he turned to the girl and told her that this poisonous plant, from which poison is made, grows only in the human world, deep in the kingdom of Niand. "I wonder how this poison got into the king's castle, and then straight into his food." The princess immediately understood what he was hinting at. "Do you suspect me now?" she asked him with a grin and explained that first of all, it was better to check those who prepared this dish. Besides, she doesn't know how to cook at all and has never helped in the kitchen. "Even if you are not guilty, by beheading you, we will set an example." Suddenly, the one-eyed demon answered her. A quarrel began between him and the princess, which only the king himself could stop. He told them to stop, and then he explained to the demon Deagle that his words made sense, given that the poisonous one grows only in the human world. "However, let's not forget that she just saved my life," he said to the surprised demon. No one could deny this fact due to suspicion. Therefore, the king ordered the lady to be released. "Besides, this is not the first time that an attempt on my life has occurred, right?" he said, and looked around at everyone present. Then the king got up from the table and said that he had no appetite, so he decided to end today's dinner there. Walk past the princess. She looked at her with an indifferent look and moved on. A little later, all the servants gathered at the door of the princess's room. Very strange, loud sounds were coming from there, and no one understood what it was. "I'll kill you, bastard!" the princess screamed, destroying all the furniture in her room. The girl was furious with the one-eyed demon, who wanted to behead her to set an example for others. How dare he? If it weren't for the king, I wouldn't have left a living place from him. Then she remembered the king. He was good too. Even though she is a human, why does he look at her with such contempt? This made the girl very upset. In any case, this won't work, the princess thought, looking out the dirty window. Both upon arrival here and during dinner. She wasn't going to put up with this kind of treatment twice. What should I do with this bastard? The princess asked herself a question, again remembering the one-eyed demon. She was going to make it so that he would have to beg her forgiveness. The princess jumped out into the street through the window. The night air was so pleasant that her mood immediately lifted. She looked at all those glowing windows of the castle. There were a lot of rooms here, and somewhere among them there was the Demon King's room where he slept soundly. Just thinking about it brought a sparkle to her eyes. She decided that she would go to him. But not because she longs to see him. She just wants to ask him about his unfair treatment of her. The princess deftly climbed the castle walls in the direction where she thought the Demon King's chambers were located. Jumping onto the huge balcony, she immediately saw him and was dumbfounded. It really was him, and these really were his chambers. The princess was filled with intense anger on the way here, but when she saw his handsome face, her heart immediately melted. She hid behind the curtains and carefully began to watch what was happening in his room. He pulled back the curtain a little, and she immediately saw something strange. He wasn't alone here. And most importantly, there was some girl with him. The princess stood on the balcony and watched the stranger flirt with the Demon King. The girl couldn't believe that her little, sweet, beloved little lion cub had another girl. Now she didn't know how best to act in this situation. My first thought was to calmly wish him happiness, but the princess still continued to think further to find at least some other options. "My king, have a nice dream," the stranger whispered tenderly, stroking the king who fell asleep on her lap. Suddenly, the princess saw a knife in the stranger's hands, which she raised over the sleeping king. The princess's reaction was lightning fast. She immediately jumped into the room and with a strong blow knocked the knife out of her hand. Then the princess grabbed a knife and put it to the frightened stranger's throat. Suddenly, some noise was heard in the room. The girl lost her vigilance for just a couple of seconds, but this was enough for the stranger to take advantage of this situation. A moment later, the princess watched the killer fly out the window. "Damn, I missed it." Suddenly, the king came to his senses. He stood unsteadily on his feet and did not understand what was happening here. And the next moment, he fell unconscious again. The girl tried to bring him to his senses, but nothing worked, no matter what she did. The princess held him in her arms and did not understand what had happened to him. He was definitely not injured, and it looked more like he was fast asleep. After some time, the Demon King finally woke up. He hasn't quite come to his senses yet, and suddenly he saw the girl's face right in front of him. What the hell? The girl jumped off his bed and smilingly asked for an apology if she scared him. The king gradually began to remember the events of that night. Although he did not fully remember what happened, but he knew for sure that this girl saved his life again. He was very surprised that she spent the whole night here and did not leave. The king understood perfectly well that she could simply leave him here. "By the way, how did you know that a murderer would come to me this night?" the king asked the girl. She said that this was not important at all. What was more important was why he immediately fell asleep if he heard what was happening around him. The king explained that since childhood, attempts on his life had been made countless times. Because of this, he couldn't sleep well, especially lately. But insomnia was not his main problem. Due to the fact that he could not get enough sleep, at the most unexpected moments he can suddenly fall asleep. The princess was amazed. All this meant that if this happened again, he could be killed at any moment. The king understood this perfectly, but he tried many ways to cure his insomnia, and the mysterious pleaser was one of them. The princess did not show it, but everything inside her was jubilant. She was immensely happy that this stranger turned out to be not his girlfriend. The Demon King was very depressed. He understood that now he could not trust anyone at all. Even if she, whom his subordinates brought, turned out to be a murderer, then he no longer had any loyal subjects left. "You have me," the princess answered the king. She knew one very simple way and asked him to trust her just once. The guy thought seriously. Previously, he would have called it absurd to trust a person. But, remembering how many times she had already saved his life, he decided to take a risk. After some time, the princess led him to a very deserted place where there was nothing around. The king did not understand why she brought him here, and how this could be connected with his insomnia. The girl explained that this was a great place so that others could not see his weak side. "So you said that you want to get a good night's sleep? Are you ready to do everything for this?" the girl asked with a serious expression on her face. Before the king had time to answer anything, a second later she, in a commanding voice, ordered him to do 100 push-ups, 100 squats, and 100 abdominal exercises. In addition to this, run 10 kilometers, and repeat this every day. The guy tried to argue something, but from her appearance and tone it was clear that it was useless to contradict her. After some time, the king was already completely immersed in training. He did push-ups, climbed and jogged with weights. The princess mocked him as soon as she wanted. Already late in the evening, the Demon King was sitting at his desk and working on documents. It was even difficult for him to hold a pen. His hands were shaking from overwork. He felt pain in every point of his body. At that moment, he really regretted that he had not trained physically for a long time, but only practiced mana. Powerlessness was felt throughout his entire body, and little by little the wave of physical fatigue took its toll. His eyes began to slowly close and he fell asleep. The next moment, the princess picked him up in her arms. "Sweet dreams, my king, and I will look after you." At the same moment, from a high tree opposite the Demon King's chamber, someone was closely watching everything that was happening. "I beg you, kill me!" On his knees, the one-eyed demon begged the king. He couldn't believe that the lady he sent to the king turned out to be a murderer. The king watched his performance with obvious boredom, but in the end he got tired of it. He told him to stop and explained that he was well aware of his devotion to the kingdom. Therefore, he does not blame him for anything, but thinks that this is just a misunderstanding. And suddenly the king unconsciously began to yawn. All this tired him very much. The one-eyed demon immediately noticed this. It was strange for him to see the king yawning. It always seemed to him that His Majesty was already accustomed to insomnia and did not even feel tired. But the king reluctantly explained that he had recently felt much better, and therefore he allows himself to rest a little sometimes. The one-eyed demon promised to be even more careful in the future to avoid such incidents. But before leaving, he asked permission to ask something about their special plan. "Is preparation going smoothly?" After this question, the king immediately became a little tense and thoughtful, but then replied that there was nothing to worry about and told him to go and rest. Walking along the long corridor that led from the king's throne room, the one-eyed demon met with his agent in a secluded place. The agent told him that all the rumors that the king spends a lot of time with the maid turned out to be true. After this, the one-eyed demon ordered to closely monitor her and report to him about all suspicious things. But most importantly, when you get the chance, kill her. A little later, outside the castle, the princess again conducted her grueling training for the king. After some time, they stopped for a short rest. The king was very exhausted, but the princess was still very pleased with his results. "Who the hell are you, really?" he suddenly asked the girl, peering intently into her face. There were many things that surprised him about her. A maid who awkwardly speaks to noble people in a casual manner. Disrespect for others literally ran in her blood, as if she was originally from a family of nobles. Moreover, she had so much strength that she was able to defeat a skilled assassin. "Aren't you just like the princess from the kingdom about whom I heard so many rumors?" Suddenly the guy said at the end, as if summing up all of the above. "Princess? What nonsense," the girl answered him. She admitted that she was a little stronger than a normal person, but that didn't mean anything. In addition, she said that the princess is much more beautiful and more modest than they were rumored to be. The guy thought for a while and pretended to believe her words. In fact, he still had a little suspicion. "Do you have any wish?" Suddenly, the king asked her again. He explained that she had already saved him twice, and even now she was spending a lot of her time to help him. And demons must always pay favors for services. "Therefore, if you want something, I will try to fulfill it." From these words, the princess was very confused. She understood that her desire was too obvious, because she only wanted one thing. There was an awkward silence. She still couldn't bring herself to say it out loud. But, plucking up courage, the princess still spoke. "Go on a date with me." The girl expected anything and ridicule and anger and humiliation. In fact, she really wanted to ask him to marry her. But she understood very well. If he marries her out of desire, it will greatly hurt her pride. "Go for what?" the king suddenly asked with complete misunderstanding on his face. As it turned out, he didn't know what it meant at all. His eyes were full of innocence. The princess couldn't understand how the Demon King could have such a look. The girl quickly explained that this is when two people walk together, eat goodies, have fun and the like. And on a date they usually hold hands, she quickly added at the end, remembering the most important thing. The Demon King thought for a while, and after a few minutes he replied that he knew of a couple of such interesting places nearby. The princess could not even think that he would lead her to an ordinary market. More precisely, not an ordinary market, but a demon market. However, the atmosphere here was quite good and friendly. All the merchants saw them as a couple, and in every possible way invited them to their counters to show their goods. They offered to look at a beautiful necklace and bracelets. They also offered to purchase wonderful heart-shaped lollipops, which are perfect for couples in love. To the surprise of the Demon King, the girls liked the headband in the form of horns the most. He didn't understand why, out of all the jewelry, she chose this one. Then the girl noticed a very cute, unusual toy, from which she simply could not take her eyes off. The king immediately noticed this and offered to give it to her. But suddenly a merchant appeared and explained that this toy is not for sale and can only be won. This prize can only be obtained if you reach 850 points or more. He explained the condition. After these words, the princess's eyes immediately sparkled. The next moment, she delivered a stunning blow to the toy ride. The Demon King, who was silently watching this, was shocked, although he didn't show it. A little later, the princess walked through the market and was happy. She had a lot of fun and really liked it here. She admitted that this market is much more interesting than the human market. Moreover, this was the first time she had seen how ordinary demons lived in his kingdom. It was surprising, but their life was almost no different from human life. Now I understand how poorly people and demons know each other, she told the king, smiling joyfully. Are you interested? Suddenly she turned to him with a question. It was very unexpected, and he did not understand why she was asking his opinion. The girl explained that this was the essence of the date. It takes two people to have fun. Although I expected something a little different, she still really liked everything. Suddenly, the princess heard a woman's cry calling for help. Turning to look at him, she saw an unhappy woman with a small child in her arms. She was bullied by two demon warriors. The girl did not understand why another person, besides the maids, was in the kingdom of demons. The demons accused the woman of theft. Even though she explained to them that she and her child were starving, she simply had no choice. Stop this performance! Your husband is a demon hunter. Thought we didn't know this? The demons shouted back and did not want to listen to her excuses. Then one of the demons, who was most tired of listening to her, took out his sword and swung it over the woman, intending to cut off her head. At the last moment, a princess appeared in front of him and managed to protect the unfortunate woman and her child from death with her sword. Stop it now! She has a baby in her arms. What are you doing? The demon girl said. But they only laughed in response. Are you ready to fight for your life in the demon kingdom? The demon warrior asked the princess. The next moment, the king intervened. He loudly ordered the carnage to stop and took off his cloak, which hid his identity from the others. A little later, the princess and the king were returned to the castle. Why didn't you stop from the very beginning? The princess asked the king. She was very upset and explained to him that if she had not intervened in time, the woman would have been dead. She didn't understand why he hesitated for so long. The guy explained that he only came out because she was trying to harm the demons, and he, in fact, should protect demons, not people. What is the logic? Is it normal if a person is simply taken and killed? The girl continued to ask with complaint. But the king answered her question with his own question. Would you protect her if she was a demon? He explained to her that he was on the side of the demon for the same reason that she was on the side of the people. Besides, aren't people so barbaric in exterminating demons? She had nothing to answer to this question. Pictures of her past immediately surfaced in her memory. All her heroic life, all she really did was exterminate demons. But she reminded the king of demons who destroy people in the same way. What about the war that happened 100 years ago? Was this war also provoked by people? After her words, the calm expression on the king's face immediately changed to angry and scary. You don't even know the backstory of why the demons started the war, he yelled at her. The girl tried to object to him that it was they who wanted to take away the territories of the human kingdom. But the demon king cut her off mid-sentence and told the true reason for this terrible war. In fact, at the foot of the mountains in which the kingdom is located, poisonous clouds were constantly accumulating. Because of these clouds, not a single ray of sun penetrated into the demon kingdom for a long time. Therefore, they could only grow a limited amount of crops and there was not enough food for everyone. That is why they decided to go to the nearest country where the sun shines, in search of productive lands. However, people believed that demons had invaded their territory. For this reason, countless demons were killed. They asked many times to help them dispel this poisonous cloud. Demonic magic and human technology would be enough to do this. But our requests were ignored over and over again. This is why the war broke out, the demon king yelled at the princess. He explained to the girl that his appearance next to the man only caused dishonor and misunderstanding on the part of his subjects. And instead of gratitude, she now dared to try to convince him. Trusting you was a mistake, he said to the drooping girl. He then admitted that it now seemed to him that his salvation had been an elaborate plan. Do you want to win my trust? And then give the demon kingdom directly into the hands of humans? A little later, the princess stood among the other maids in the kitchen. She was simply furious and destroyed everything around her. The rest of the maids were in shock and asked the main Morok to save them from this crazy girl. Tina, this won't do. You don't seem to be in the right state. Go and get some rest. The The sad princess slowly walked to her room, thinking about her recent conversation with the king. What hurt her most was his words that he shouldn't have trusted her. Suddenly, she felt someone put a hand on her shoulder. The girl turned around sharply. Her hand itself was ready to strike. But suddenly the stranger took off his mask and she saw her only childhood friend named Shane. "Hello, how have you been?" The princess was very glad to see him, but at the same time she was very surprised and did not understand what he was doing here. The guy explained that he had to live in this cold, lonely world. Due to the fact that he is from the human delegation, he is under strict surveillance. Therefore, he was able to come here only in his disguise. Most importantly, the guy was delighted. While he was gone, she never got into trouble and didn't learn anything. Shine admitted. He thought that in less than a day, everything here would be on edge because of her. "You didn't do anything, right?" the guy asked in a sweet voice. Very little time passed and he was already talking to her in a completely different tone. Shane couldn't believe that during this time she had already saved the king's life twice, helped him cope with insomnia, and they even went on a date. "What will you do if they find out who you really are?" the young man asked the princess in desperation. The princess replied that now there was no need to worry about it, and admitted that the king had driven her away. "Shane, tell me, is it true that humans make life difficult for demons?" she suddenly asked. "The fact that demons started a war on the territory of our kingdom is a lie, right?" The guy replied that they shouldn't talk about it here. It was better to do it somewhere else, so they decided to go to her room, which was very close. All this time, from afar, hiding under the shadow of trees, someone was closely watching them and trying to remember their every word and action. It was already deep night, and the king was still sitting at his desk. He was trying to work on papers, but at the same time he was thinking about something completely different. He was very surprised that he didn't feel like sleeping at all. This girl also couldn't get out of his head. Indeed, she was the person who helped him sleep. The guy went out onto the balcony to get some fresh air, and suddenly noticed some movement under the castle walls. He looked closely and saw how the maid, whom he remembered a minute ago, was quickly running somewhere. Shortly before this, in the princess's room, Shane told everything he knew. In fact, he himself did not know all the details. But he was sure that there was a reason why the kingdom refused to help the demons. Everyone just had their own point of view. The young man advised the princess not to succumb to other people's statements. Believe only in what you can see with your own eyes. That is why the princess ran through the forest in the dead of night. She clearly remembered the words of that demon from the market. The demon reproached the unfortunate woman that her husband was a demon hunter. The most interesting thing is that she had never heard of such a thing as a demon hunter. Now the princess understood that she did not even know how deep the conflict between people and demons was. And now she decided that she had to see it with her own eyes. At this time in the deep forest, two people approached an inconspicuous run-down hut. "You will be amazed at the variety." One of them spoke to his interlocutor. He explained that thanks to a hunter named Ogbur, not a single demon remained in the area. His interlocutor was very happy to hear this. He admitted that he was looking forward to seeing everything with his own eyes. And at that moment, when the door was already open, the princess suddenly appeared. She stunned one man and placed her sword at the throat of the second. The princess was very amazed when she saw what was hiding behind the door of this dilapidated hut. Inside there were immediately stone steps that led somewhere deep down. The girl took the torch and began to descend. What appeared before her eyes at the very bottom amazed her even more. It was a real huge prison with a lot of cells, and in one of them there were prisoners. She simply had no words. The unfortunate demons sat doomedly in their cells. The princess did not understand how this could happen. The demons got scared when they saw the man and began to beg for mercy. The princess at that moment was thinking about only one thing. She had always been told that all demons were terrible. That is why she must protect people and exterminate demons. What she successfully did for almost her entire adult life. "What the heck? Why did I do all this?" the girl asked herself while kneeling in front of the camera. Suddenly, in the distance, she heard voices talking about an intruder who had entered here. It was heard that they were heading straight towards her. The princess took out her sword and hid in the shadows. She was already prepared for battle. "Do you think you can kill them? These are people." Suddenly, the princess heard a voice behind her. Turning around, she saw the Demon King. The girl was amazed and did not understand how he ended up here. But before she had time to say anything to him, she heard the sounds of people quickly approaching here. They were guards rushing to check on their prisoners. The girl again prepared for battle. But the next moment the king took her hand and quickly hid her under his cloak. Immediately after this, the guards came running here. They heard a strange noise here but never found anyone. This is weird. I definitely heard some sounds. One of the guards spoke to the other, carefully examining everything around. Then he approached the cell with the captured demons and began yelling at them to be quiet. "You bastards can't sit quietly?" The princess at that moment was ready to attack these scum. But the king restrained her impulse, gently taking her hand, and he motioned for her to be very quiet. Then something strange began to happen in the dungeon. It was filled with dark shadows which, like black smoke, began to circle in the air around the guards. In an instant, they were all simultaneously immobilized and unable to breathe. A moment later, they fell unconscious on the floor. The Demon King did all this without making a sound. The princess was very surprised that he did not kill them. The prisoners in the cell could not believe their eyes. They were amazed that the king himself came to their rescue. "I had no idea that you were being kept in such a place. Thanks to that girl, I can rescue you." The guy answered them, pointing to the princess. The girl watched from afar as the demons were grateful to their king, who had gone so far for them. The princess at that moment realized that, unlike her, the Demon King had unquestionably won the trust of his people. At the same time, she understood their hatred for all this time that people humiliated them. And despite the fact that the king did not kill these people, the prisoners did not demand their death. The wary attitude towards her also immediately disappeared after the king told them about her. He was a trusted ruler. The princess was even a little jealous. Why did the girl explain to the king that it could still be dangerous here, and he and the prisoners urgently needed to leave? "Aren't you going?" he asked the girl in surprise. But then he was even more surprised when he heard from her that she still needed to do something here. "You know how to surprise me," he confessed to her. "She came here with an offering, like a maidservant. I was able to look him straight in the eye, knocked the poisoned soup out from under his nose, and I even visited his chambers. Then she said that she would help him get rid of insomnia, and out of the blue she forced him to train. And now she's going to be left alone in such a dangerous place." The king listed all her antics, and he himself could not believe that he had contacted her. "And yet I want to check something," the girl insisted. She admitted that his words left her confused. Everything she believed in until now was now in doubt. And now that she has seen what he is doing, she begins to understand a little what is now much more important than the truth. The girl explained to the king that she wanted to become like him. This is why she needs to stay here. The king looked carefully into her eyes and asked her to promise him that she would return safe and sound. "I will definitely keep my promise. I won't die for anything." A little later, the princess came out through a tunnel to a huge house. She easily got rid of the few guards without causing any alarm. She then climbed through the window with the intention of finding a demon hunter named Rick Ogber. These people kidnapped demons from the outskirts of the kingdom, and then sold them to some people. Those who fell into their hands became slaves, and after that they were simply thrown away. The girl understood that among the demons there are also those who commit crimes against people. But that was already the problem of the Demon King. But she must take care of the problems associated with her people. "Hey, are you Ogber?" the princess asked, entering the office in which a man was sitting at the table, turning away from her. "What brings you here so late at night?" a male voice asked without turning to her. The girl asked him not to pretend that he did not understand what was happening here. She then admitted that she had attacked the warehouse with imprisoned demons. "This is so inhuman. Why are you on the side of the demons?" This voice asked her again quite calmly. And without waiting for an answer, he continued. "Because you are in love with the king." The man tried to explain that her actions would greatly disappoint people. A princess from the human kingdom fell in love with the Demon King and took his side. But the princess was tired of all this talk. She quickly walked up to the table and sharply turned his chair towards her. The next moment she saw the dead body of a man fall from the chair to the floor. The girl even managed to think that she accidentally killed him with her own hands. And suddenly I heard a woman's voice near me. "I can transform my hollow." It wasn't so easy to imitate the old man's voice. "Long time no see, Princess Atina." It was a stranger from the Demon King's chambers who wanted to kill him. The princess was absolutely sure it was definitely her. "Have you been spying on me all this time?" the princess asked her. The stranger confirmed her guesses. Hiding from prying eyes was another of her abilities. The stranger admitted that she did not expect the girl to turn out to be that same princess. She realized this only after she overheard her conversation with her subordinate. The princess immediately understood what she was talking about. It was the moment of their unexpected meeting with Shane. And of course she heard their entire conversation. Then the stranger said that she noticed how she was getting closer and closer to the Demon King. Therefore, she decided to first deal with the princess and then kill him. And today is that very day, she added angrily. The next moment she took out a weapon and attacked the princess with all her cruelty. But to her surprise, the girl did not budge, and with a wave of one hand she stopped her attack, completely disarming her. I have only one question. Why do you hate the Demon King? The princess said at that moment, surprised by her strength to the stranger. The killer was amazed. What just happened said only one thing. If the princess really teams up with the Demon King, she and her accomplices will have no chance of victory. He will never become a good ruler. She answered the princess's question. She then added that he would never get blood on his hands. And they did not want to honor the powerful Demon King who shows mercy to people. People will pay for their sins with their lives. Die too, she shouted and took out a knife from under her dress. She then quickly dealt her blow to them. Drops of scarlet blood flowed straight onto the floor. I don't know what bad people did to you, but I apologize for them, the princess answered, at that moment squeezing the blade of a sharp knife with her wounded hand. The girl explained that she had no idea that such a thing was happening. But I can't die. I made a promise. Suddenly she said in a completely calm voice and knocked the knife out of the killer's hand. The stranger was dumbfounded, but she had no intention of dying at the hands of a man. She was not afraid and knew that her will would definitely be fulfilled by her comrades or master. Suddenly the princess saw that she was about to commit suicide. The girl quickly reacted and stuck her fingers into her mouth, receiving deep bloody wounds. I won't let you do it yourself, the princess said in a confident voice and added that if she so wants to kill herself, let him do it alone and not in front of her. But if you are not going to kill yourself, then just wait a little longer and see how I change this world. The girl was returning to the Demon King's castle late at night. Have you just returned? Suddenly she heard his voice. He had been waiting for her all this time and was very worried. The girl smilingly replied that she had fulfilled her promise and returned alive. Suddenly the guy looked intently into her eyes. He smelled blood and immediately took her wounded hand. The girl was a little embarrassed at first, but then told the king that she had better return to her kingdom. After listening to you and seeing everything with my own eyes, I realized that I need to change a lot. But the king reminded her that she was given to him as a sign of respect, and this meant that she belonged only to him, and she has no right to freedom. And you try to stop me, the princess answered him, smiling. The king smiled back at her and replied that he had no intention of doing so. But he has one small condition. In the huge celebration hall, music was playing and there were a lot of guests. Shane was very surprised when he saw something like this in the Demon King's castle. He asked the waiter the reason for this celebration. The waiter, quickly told him that this was the annual royal ball, an important event where all the high-ranking people of the Demon Kingdom gather. But today is a more special day. Unlike all previous years, the king will come with a lady, the waiter said, smiling, and walked further down the hall with the tray. Suddenly the arrival of the Demon King was announced. Shine had not seen him for a very long time, and he noticed how the king was greeted by his subjects. He really has the quality of a good ruler, the guy thought at that moment. If you look at how happy his servants and all the nobles were to see him, it immediately became clear. At the same time, Shane understood perfectly well. Despite the respect and trust of his people, one could always find enemies among them. After much applause and cheers, the king addressed everyone present. He said he would make a very important announcement at the end of the event. Therefore, he asked everyone not to leave until the evening was over. And before we start, he wanted to continue his speech, but a terrible noise and roar was heard throughout the entire hall. Behind the closed door, the scream of the main Morak could be heard. Wait, it's not time yet. You shouldn't go in there. I beg you, listen to me, Tina. Shane immediately understood what was going on here, and he himself was waiting for what would happen now. The door suddenly opened sharply and she entered. Well, this time she was not wearing servant clothes but a chic dress. The king was amazed by her spectacular appearance. Of course, he didn't plan everything this way, but he immediately went to meet her halfway. He then took her hand and led her across the hall in front of the shocked guests. Shane. Now I understand everything. But he still couldn't believe that the king's lady, whom everyone was waiting for, was a princess. At first he became hysterical and was very worried that the princess had gotten into a bad situation again. But then he looked at her and suddenly understood. It was the first time the young man had seen her so beautiful and elegant. He was surprised that the princess was able to transform so quickly. "They're all looking at me," the girl said to the king with slight embarrassment as they walked through the hall. He explained to her that they all needed time. She was the first person he brought to this event. This was exactly his condition when the princess told him that she needed to return to her kingdom. "If you take part in it as my partner, I will consider your request." He then answered her. "I don't pay any attention to the looks of those around me." They continued to walk on. The guy continued to explain that his subjects also have a warning of prejudice towards people. And he admitted that after meeting her, his opinion changed dramatically. "That's why I asked you to come here with me. I want others to dispel their prejudices too." The princess smiled and promised to take care of it. And the next moment they began to dance. Everything went well. It was a wonderful evening. They both managed to have a lot of fun, not paying any attention to the sidelong glances of their ill-wishers. In the end, the princess was tired. Now she understood very well how hard it was to be a king and hold such events every year. "Aren't there such celebrations in your kingdom?" The guy was sincerely surprised. The girl replied that of course there was, but she always ran away from them. "Are you running away? But you are a maid." The guy was surprised again. The princess quickly straightened up and replied that she meant to take a vacation for this period. "King, I prepared what you asked for." Suddenly the main Morak appeared with a tray on which stood 2 glasses with something. The king explained that it was a drink made from an ingredient called Hyax. This is a rare stone that increases magical power. As the demon king, he had to drink it at all events, including this one. But today he decided to ask her to share this burden with him. "I don't use magic. Do I need to drink this?" the girl asked doubtfully, but the king reassured her that it would not harm her. After one sip, the girl immediately realized that this was very good for the last drink she drank in his kingdom. "By the way, what important announcement do you want to make?" the princess asked the king. He thought for a moment, and the next moment she felt very dizzy. Everything swam before her eyes and she felt that she was about to lose consciousness. At that moment, the door was suddenly thrown open by a kick. Then a group of armed demons burst into the hall. All the guests were shocked by their sudden appearance. But the most important thing is that the demons who burst in acted under the leadership of a one-eyed demon named Deagle. "What's happening?" the king asked him, who at that time was also trying to hold the fainting girl in his arms. "This is treason, my lord. You will have to leave the throne and say goodbye to life."